Welcome to live stream coverage of Budget Debate 2023 from the opposition side in the Guyana House of Parliament.
Members Gita Chandan Edmund and Priya Manichan would cover up. So when I look at them, then I would make a signal to the boys to cut these. And then when I see Bishop Edgehill, Honorable Member, and Honorable Gilta Shearer start fanning, I say, well, put it on. So, but we've tried I know the vents are aiming down at us, but there's an issue since the system was designed. And if we shut it off too early, we're going to damage the relays and wouldn't have a sit on. So bear with us in the dome. And yes, some people ask, is there any thought of going back to the original place? The clerk and I looked at that last year, and as of October, we're ready. We have one issue with the public address system. There is some amount of interference. It's an old entry-level system that has a frequency that is easily disturbed by other wireless systems passing. So we have someone looking within a week or two to look at that system and rectify that. But yes, preparations are being made. People like Honorable Member Ramson and Ben, they always complain about getting their knees hit every time they come in. But we've been a fabulous place, and the general public loves us to be here because of the traffic congestion downtown. So please bear with us, and again, our great appreciation to Minister Walron and at the Convention Center for the accommodation, especially over the past 2.5 years.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers and reports, etc. Reports from committees, oral questions without notice, questions and notice.
Honorable members, there are 3 questions on today's order paper, and these questions are for oral replies. These questions are in the name of the Honorable Member Jeremy Pereira, and he is here, yes. So, Honorable Member, you may now proceed and ask your first question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recognition of the fact that the Minister who is supposed to be answering this question is not here, do I proceed?
Let me just check online to see if Minister's online. So someone just check he's not online. Can we then hold these until tomorrow, Sherlock? We'll hold them until the Minister's here. We'll defer them for tomorrow or questions without reply. Sherlock?
Statements by ministers, including policy statements. Personal explanation. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills. Public business. Government's business.
Honorable members, we will now proceed with the consideration of Budget 2023, and our first speaker today is the Honorable Member, Mr. Kamraj Ramjatai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a new paradigm in Guyana in relation to revenue streams. Revenue streams today include the monies from that oil and gas contract that we signed on to in 2016, and also from the credit carbons as a result of our forests being in pristine state. Carbon credits is what you call the monies from that project. And Guyana, as a result of especially that petroleum agreement, is today, per capita one can say, probably the richest country in the Americas. And it is very important too that we understand the multiplier effect of that project, namely all the businesses, all the other operators, and so many other nuclear impacts, as it were, from that one sector that today now brings in so much money. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, when I heard some of the government benches yesterday talking and trying to do comparisons with what we did as a coalition government, I want to indicate that that is rather unfair, if not dubious, because of the fact that the revenue streams today is far superior from anything we ever had. And that is why, although it was called a rotten agreement, and in the recent newspaper I see the S word being used by a former vice president, by the existing vice president, we feel that we must not compare the two. Yesterday, Mr. Ganesh and Mr. Chris, honorable members on this side, explained what we did, especially in sports and culture and in local government, to show that with the little that we have, then what we did. And so this kind of analysis whereby the PPP would want to say that we ain't do nothing, we ain't do one thing, it must be understood. We have to now make sure that the comparisons are comparable, as it were. Mr. Speaker, we must not compare this context with what happened before. What we must insist on, is a comparison as to what is being done now with that large revenue stream by the PPP as against what ought to be done. And that is why in this budget, just before it, we had indicated that we would like to have some halves in relation to what this budget must state. And yesterday, my good friend, Mr. Joe Hamilton, was giving the impression that we do not propose anything. We do not propose anything. Well, I want to say that we did propose a number of things in a release called Budget 2023 Must-Haves. And we indicate that we wanted an increase in the minimum wage of $150,000 with corresponding adjustments to personal income tax. We proposed an increase in old age pension to $50,000. We proposed an increase in disability benefits to $40,000. We proposed a reduction of VAT to 12%. And we also proposed that new shelters around the administrative regions for women being abused. These shelters would support the victims of domestic violence, along with the two others that was mentioned by Joe. Mr. Speaker, we understand that in every budget cycle, you're going to have more and more now being spent. But it is not good enough to say that we have done this and exclude us from what ought to be done. And in the context of a Guyana in which, as the Kaichur News mentioned, 43% of Guyanese can't afford a healthy diet, 5% undernourished, and this is an FAO report. It happens today, and you can argue whatever you want, but the whole point of it is that it is not intellectual dishonesty. Look at them, look at them. We are saying that it is important to understand, even Mr. Speaker, this is why, you know, the give and take in a normal democracy is absent with that kind of attitude.
However, the give and take in the House, though, is when you are going to quote the report and lay over for us, and quote the source.
But an important editorial as to our cost of living. Everything has gone up. Everything. I'm not being intellectually dishonest here. The Stabrook News in an editorial indicated, please don't get so fired up, Mr. Finance Minister. Don't get so fired up. I am saying that in today's context, we are having a hard time. And that hard time is as a result of the tremendously high cost of living. And in that reality, we must ensure that we do the comparatives as to what we could do now with the oil and gas and credit carbons revenue stream as against what we are doing. And there is every righteousness about that. You have you have at least the attitude of indicating that we must not go there. Well, I am going to go there. Mr. Speaker, it is very important then that we do an analysis as to why it is not being done. The analysis is simple. This is a working class supposed government. It forgot about all of that. A good time now. And it is going on and on in relation to what is called certain schemes, very clever, in which a certain set of people in Guyana are going to be the beneficiaries. I want to indicate, Mr. Speaker, when you have the construction industry having so much money poured into it, when you have so much money being poured into the construction, rule of thumb, it is a certain set of contractors who are friends and family will always be the beneficiaries. Construction industry is going to Mr. Speaker, the heckling started very early this morning. But I am telling you that the construction industry is one of the epicenters of corruption. I will lay over the report of Transparency International 2005, which indicated that that is especially happening with oil resource countries. Some bites. I'm glad that it's biting you. Mr. Speaker, it has all the ingredients conducive for corruption. There are so many uncertainties in the execution that it is possible to draw what it is impossible to draw what so many economists refer to as the complete contract. You can't get a complete contract, let's say, for that harbor bridge as to what and what it will be at the cost. You cannot have, for some of the roads in Guyana, you cannot have a complete contract as to what it will cost. And that is why so many roads are being built, and next day, literally, they're breaking and apart. And you know what the corruption, especially in that construction industry, does? It creates what is called an undermining of the political process. And it enables patronage to triumph over honest politics. Mr. Speaker, we know very well that as against what we have as infrastructural spendings in Guyana, a little bit of that could have been nudged away and at least be given to the working people so that the working people can have a better day than not having to literally get malnourished. Mr. Speaker, I am happy that I have gotten up the bile of the Minister of Finance. It means that I am making a good point. Mr. Speaker, it is all there. It is all there. And we're going to come to what is happening now. The EPA, the EITI, all of those institutions are also today, as a result, being subverted because of what we have under the corruption and the patronage that is happening in Guyana. These transformational projects, as they call them, as Comrade Siraj yesterday talked about, and I regard Mr. Siraj as a typical PPP person, but he also made some dubious comments. Here, this is what is being said by him. The PPP is not thinking about votes. That is why we are having big transformational projects. Listen to me, Mr. Leaders, people over there. That PPP leadership always think about that and nothing else. It's a well-oiled political machinery. Whenever it makes any decision, it thinks about the votes. And I know about that. That is the leadership. It is the reason why, and it is the reason why they seek to dodge today, Mr. Speaker, a strong EPA and also a strong EITI. This resource-rich country today is having what is called elections without good governance. They prefer elections only, as if elections is what is democracy. Elections is not democracy, Mr. Speaker. Elections is one component, and they're there now. And they had an inheritance and a largesse that is the greatest ever. And that is why I said, your inheritance that you have been devised, the inheritance that you have been devised is that which is so humongous. But you got to know better, Mr. Ashley Singh, honorable member, as to how you're going to spend that money. Don't ever say that these projects might be transformational. I remember when they said that the Skeldon Sugar Factory will be transformational. Where is the Skeldon Sugar Factory today? Fiber optic cable, FIP Motilal's road, all of that. You must understand that it is not because you deem it transformational. What was transformational, however, is when we signed that agreement that it could make you $200 billion today to spend in this budget. What was transformational was the right sizing of the sugar industry so that you don't pour good money behind bad sectors and billions of dollars.
Honorable member, I just want to caution you. Remember, you're speaking with the speaker. So when you say you must, you're admonishing the speaker to do something. If you want to refer to the other side, the honorable members over there, right? Because I take some of these things personally.
It is not a budget that I can support. There is no planning, there is no targeting, there is no outputs. The budget is pathetically policy poor. A PPP, pathetically policy poor. Yes, they love to say that it is the biggest budget, but I want to say, as Mr. Christopher Ram has indicated in his analysis, it is also with the biggest deficit. Biggest budget with the biggest deficit. Mr. Speaker, we have taken some severe body blows of recent times. Severe body blows. I mean, you have Mr. Kwame McCoy, he was very slippery yesterday, and he walked with his own aisle. And it's a wrong size bottle he walked with too. Mr. Speaker, we have to understand that because of that no planning, no outputs, no targeting, policy poor budget, that is why the cost of living has gone so high. That is why effectively, compared to what the salaries and wages are, why it is that the people can't find what is called better conditions or standard of living. It is because we could have done, notwithstanding what might be the economic reasons for inflation, we could have neutralized or neutered those with at least better incomes. Tell us how. And it is instead of spending so much on infrastructure, you could have given 5% more for the people of this country. How much you spending on workers? Yes, you could have even given 10% more. And you are stating today that we could not. Mr. Speaker, we did not have that revenue stream that is like a gold stream today. We don't have it. And that is why it is important. You don't deal with poverty by cash transfers like that. What is the output of $40,000 for 10-day work? You're just going to buy the votes. That is all you know about, buying the votes over there. Mr. Speaker, it is important. You are there. I don't know about votes being stolen. If it is any votes, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the preliminary points I wish to make in relation to this budget. And I think I have been rather impactful, don't you think? Today, the cost of living, as I wanted to make this point, cost of living is so much. Everything up. Even when you go to the market and you see fish, ginger, dal, rice, everything gone up. And these people are saying with a humongous revenue stream that they can't do better. Show me now, show me. That is their contrived histrionics. That's their contrived theatrics. Just like what Slippery Kwame said yesterday.
Okay, honorable member, Mr. Ramjet, and you know better. You're in here longer than I am. You know, I just want to. I don't like to interrupt people of my cohort, so I allowed you 10 times to use corruption during the speech, right? And I've asked you to deal with. You either say Comrade Kwame, regardless of reference to his oil, or honorable member Kwame McCoy.
To spend so much money on sugar is pouring good money behind bad, Mr. Finance Minister. We have spent prior to this budget approximately $13 billion. We are today going to spend another $4 billion behind sugar. They have been advertising for jobs at Rose Hall, and people are not coming. Mr. Speaker, we gave them their severance benefits. If it is going to drag an economy down, we had to make the correct decision. That was transformational. Mr. Speaker, we repeat and maintain that the false explanations and narrative being given by the government, the Minister of Agriculture and CEO of Gaisuco are all ill-advised and is a road to nowhere. Mr. Speaker, the evidence is clear that a perennial shortage of labor will persist in this sector, that the new CEO and all of his arrogant attitude that caused even a board member.
Honorable member, again, we have a standing order with respect to accusations against persons who are not in here, who can't defend themselves. But as we're on this point, let me just say I've given you an extra minute because of the interruptions, but you'll need a 5-minute extension so that you could conclude. But before I ask the Honorable... Sorry. 30 minutes. You have 10 minutes more in the first 30. Yes. Let me just... I have allocated already the 1 minute and 30 seconds of interruptions on my part. Honorable member, you may continue.
Sugar has been dying since we lost that preferential treatment. Moreover, our workforce is not trained. Our workforce is not trained beyond substantially a cutlass and punt mentality. That is not what the next generation in the estates have been telling me that they want. They want to get jobs into the new sectors. And you want them to have this cutlass and punt mentality so that you can always bamboozle them and confuffle them. Mr. Speaker, we are always going to have, and especially with climate change, we are always going to have problems with that sugar industry. It's management, no workforce, GAU having strikes all the time, and you must now appreciate the transformational decision that was made to right-size that sector. In relation to rice, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I'm happy to hear $300 million to promote research and development to improve yields and to ensure alternatives to insecticides to control that paddy bug. I come from the rice industry originally, and I know a little about it. But in relation to this, livestock and poultry, I dare say that I have seen a paradox here that I found in the statistics, which Mr. Zulfikar provided. We see an increase in livestock production and poultry production, but we see a reduction of milk and eggs. I hope that the minister must, is not a reason for that. Or whatever the reason for it, there must be major interventions for milk and eggs. Mr. Speaker, we have also fisheries, cage fishing, it's called now, cage fishing, brackish water shrimp farms, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, we must also do an analysis as to why all these fish sectors has gone into a decline. Mr. Speaker, we had a report that came out recently in which it is saying that it could very well be what honorable member was saying yesterday, so much environmental hazardous stuff being poured into the ocean. But you don't want to do an analysis as to that and to speak the truth to the people in the fisherfolk community. However, you're going to take how much billion? 1 billion to give the 7,500 fisherfolk cash grants. That's not how you're going to solve the fishing industry's problem. Mr. Speaker, these are what are non-starters in relation to what is called aspects of the agriculture policy. Forestry, you have indicated, Mr. Speaker, there are lots that could be done other than just handing out cash transfers. You should have gone and taken on Mr. Vince Adams to tell the Exxon people what they must not do. What they must not do. And that is, don't throw the water with the oil inside of the ocean. That is one of the reasons. But you don't want that. Now you're proposing and they want to dispose. You're proposing and they want to dispose. What do you think about the cash grants? Cash grants in relation to $349 million for this cage fishing and brackish water. Mr. Speaker, why don't you tell us who and who will be the beneficiaries of this cage fishing and the brackish water shrimping? Mr. Speaker, you're allowing them to interrupt all the time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they are always, Mr. Speaker, when you are going to do all of that kind of cash grants, 589 to 6,991 farmers, it is not going to go well with anybody. And especially when, as against another community, you do not raise the wages and salaries, especially of public servants. The other community, you know what I'm talking about. It is important that you now understand that some money should be put in there. Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that the security sector is in disarray today. With the little that we had, the security sector, under which came the police, fire, and prison and Kanu, much was done. Under local funding, under the Citizens Security Strengthening, under the British Security Sector Reform Report, which the PPP was so afraid of and scared of. They didn't want the British security reform at all. We have done plenty. And I am happy that in view of this paradigm shift of lots more monies in the revenue stream, that we must see Mr. Ben and his team, honorable member, continue the good works that we had started. Crime has gone up to the stratosphere. Execution style murders, almost a weekly event. Domestic violence, robbers, choke and rob. On the videos you could see it happening. And even cutlass and gun firing at the President's State House. It is terrible. And of course, the advisories from the various countries indicating that you got to be real careful when you come to Ghana. Last year, the minister had a lot to say of what what was not done by the APNU AFC coalition. He will speak after me in this debate, but I want to just remind him of the very many things that we did. Mr. Speaker, we have strengthened patrol management and the use of data and analytics in policing. We have promoted a culture of nonviolence in those years, improving and appropriating money for public spaces. We have fostered socio-economic insertion activities for at-risk youth. We do not see that happening now. We restructured the Office of Professional Responsibility. We also had commenced and was going ahead with the Guyana Forensic Laboratory, and we understand that this is continuing. But what we have now, Mr. Speaker, is but an extreme levels of crime, and it would appear that all those consultancies that we had in relation to Mr. Russell Coombe and the British security sector reform have been shelved. Mr. Speaker, we had continued to ensure that we had close collaboration with the Caribbean Development Bank and the various institutions, CONSLE and RSS, and so many. Mr. Speaker, we had done a huge set of work in relation to rehabilitating and building new police stations and all of that. And at-risk youths, as I just mentioned. The TechVox school education was also done with the assistance of the Citizen Security Strengthening Program. So, you know, when they come here and say nothing was done, with the little that we had, lots were done. Lots were done.
For you to do more, honorable member, you will have to get a 5 minutes extension now.
Comrade Speaker, I move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes undisturbed to conclude his presentation.
Could you define this undisturbed 5 minutes for me? Honorable member, you may continue for the next 5 minutes towards your conclusion.
One of the important aspects was also ensuring that we had scrutiny and transparency in the security sector. And it is pursuant to Article 119D of the Constitution, we are supposed to have what is called the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on the security sector. You know, since the start of this parliament, we have not had any meetings of that Parliamentary Oversight Committee. Mr. Speaker, when on the inside of our administration, I have the Hansard of the meetings. All the members of the various discipline services forces have been called there and cross-examined by Mr. Gill, Mr. Rohi, Mr. Berry Ramsaran, and also Mr. Hamilton. Hamilton was there, but you don't have it now. You don't have it now. Hansard will show Mr. Gentle being cross-examined, Silal Fasad being cross-examined, and also Courtney Samuels being cross-examined. What do we have today? That is why I'm saying that we have a governance structure in Guyana, the governance structure in Guyana that wants to avoid and evade and eschew. This is called our security sector from whatever. This was 2017 and 2016, yes. And in 2018, Mr. Gill asked that we go into the interior areas. We had to find from this committee monies to go take them to check on police stations all across the country. Today, they have made that thing dysfunctional. So we can't ask Mr. Hicken anything. We can't ask the heads and the deputy heads anything at all. And that is why today, that is a violation of our constitution and our standing orders. And Gail, Mr. Honorable Member, knows about all of that. Mr. Speaker, I just want to conclude by stating it is important that we take cognizance of what we had done in relation to preparing and planning for what is called this security sector. We had Mr. Russell Coombe and the British High Commission dealing with the work and a consultancy on maritime security and safety. It was a preparatory work for purposes of ensuring when the oil and gas stream comes on board, what it is that we have to do. And they did a magnificent piece of work in relation to threat assessments and all. The current threats at that point in time, around 2019, is the Venezuelan hostile action. They were talking about present and near future. Cyber attack targeting government department or agency. Mr. Speaker, significant fire, explosion, or other industrial incident at the shore bases and maritime facilities. Cyber attack targeting poor facility. And even they mentioned here, projected threats, civil protests due to perceived unfair distribution of oil and gas revenues. As we are seeing today, civil protests due to perceived unfair distribution of oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, what we're going to have is a tremendous amount of resentment and disaffection, as they said, if this is not seen to be distributed equitably. And they are going to make sure, and then what they did was make sure that this must be done in accordance to avoid any security threats. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? They don't want to acknowledge that kind of planning and preparatory work. We now see them today avoiding all of that. I understand that Mr. Russell Coombe had come back, and I am certain that he would have given them the reports. But they have not, in this budget at least, tried to knit that kind of security projections into what is called a budgetary arrangement so that we can spend wisely for those projected threats. Mr. Speaker, with all of these that I have just spoken about, the preambular remarks on sugar and rice and all of that, it is important to understand you really cannot support this budget. You really cannot. It has all the hallmarks of that which is ensuring a disproportionate distribution of our oil and gas funding, oil and gas monies. And we are waging now a serious psychological battle as to the resentments that will be coming. We are in an explosive situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to make these points.
Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan. Before I call on the next contributor, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge a few persons in the gallery. Their Excellencies Ambassador Liz Harper, Ivan Evelyn, and Charlene Phoenix, along with National Security Advisor Captain Gerald Gavaya and Go Invest CEO and his team, CEO Dr. Peter Ramsuru. And now it's for the Honorable Member, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Honorable Member, Mr. Hugh Todd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by thanking my dear colleague and friend, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by thanking my colleague and dear friend, Minister Ashley Singh, for articulating accurately the people's wishes, promises made, promises delivered, and a continuous path to prosperity. This budget, Mr. Speaker, steadfast against all challenges, resolute in building one Guyana, provides a clear direction of His Excellency's vision and a full representation of the people, being focused, centered, and led by the citizens of this great nation of ours. Mr. Speaker, it's very difficult for me to respond to Honorable Member Mr. Ramchatan. Everything that he would have proffered clearly shows the disconnect between the opposition and the people. I dare say that they're a resting opposition. Resting. They're at rest. And we believe in honesty and integrity. We believe in going to the people. We believe on administration based on having the people involved. Remember that slogan that you carried, honesty and integrity? Well, let me enlighten you. We believe in interaction. We believe in meeting directly with the people, connecting with regions and communities across Guyana. We have committed to taking government to the people. And we've been doing that consistently since we took office back in 1992 and when we were returned to office in 2020. Mr. Speaker, I have made many visits to Linden and Region 10. And we like to always show the rest of the world and the diaspora that this country is really being led by the people. And that is why we don't only speak to you from our position, but we let you know what the people are saying. Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, let me share with you and our honorable members on the other side and the people of Guyana and within the diaspora some of the responses that we got from the people of Linden and Region 10. And this is November 2022, very recent. Ms. Esther Benjamin, we're getting somewhere. At least the government is trying to lift the standard and give people opportunities. I like what the government is doing. It's good for Guyanese people. End of quote. Pauline Thom, I must say this government is sticking to their words and they are working towards everything they say. This is not us. This is the people, Mr. Speaker. The people responding to us when we go on outreach. Mr. Troy Duncan, pay careful attention now, honorable members. This refers to you. For the past 5 years, we haven't seen anything what the previous government did, referring to the previous government, the APNU AFC government. And for the past couple of months, this government in power, it really improved. I regret not playing a better part. But trust me, in the future, you will have my support 100,000%.
Today is day 2 of that debate session, and you would have just been looking at the presentation from our honorable member, Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan. And then he gave a beautiful presentation, talked about the cost of living situation, the agriculture sector, and much on the home affairs and security issues that we're facing. So we'll have a little talk with him in a few on what he presented there. Now, we listened to a powerful presentation last evening as we heard Miss Natasha Singh Lewis as she gives her presentation in regards to the sector of education, and she made beautiful contributions there. I want to welcome her to today's discussion as we talk a bit about what you presented last evening. And I know all of our presenters, you were all running out of time. You had quite a few interruptions during your presentation. So you have an opportunity now to talk to the viewers and share with us your parts of your presentation and whatever was left out.
Thank you, Shanika. It's awesome to be back. First of all, it's awesome to be back in the National Assembly to represent the people. Most of us are coming back from our 6 months of suspension while we were out. The suspension did take a toll on all of us, but nevertheless, we will continue to champion our cause. The people would have elected us to represent them, and that is what we will do. Now, yesterday being our first day in the budget debates, my own reflection is that we have, at the end of the day, we have taken the PPP by surprise. They are, when we left here last night, they were on their back feet.
Yeah,
and I just left the house after Honorable Kemraj Ramjatan's presentation, and I can tell you that their modus operandi for today is to distract us from making those recommendations. And it's something that we have to continue to do because as a coalition, the APNU AFC, we had a plan while in government. What we're seeing in this budget is the ad hocery in implementing things. There is no proper plan in place to show the Guyanese people what development is going to take place. And so every year since 2020, there's a budget, and every year it keeps getting bigger. This year is the biggest budget that we have experienced. What can we expect in education with $94.4 billion? Let me say to you that most of what is captured in that $94.4 billion is routine work. There is no particular project that is going to tell us about this transformative process for education that they're talking about. And I took a little bit of time, I think a lot of my time, on making recommendations to show them what the plan for transformative education means. In this budget, they're talking about improving the lives of people today and prosperity for tomorrow. Well, let me say to you that they're not improving the lives of Guyanese today, and so prosperity is doomed. Let me say to you that if they had any clue what it is to develop the human resources of our country, they would have looked at simple things that will not cost us as a country. One very significant thing that they could have done if they recognized the importance of youth development, because a lot of our young people attended the University of Ghana, a lot of young people are still there. They could have written off all of the student debts. They could have done that. Now, what does that do? That takes away that debt that student has to repay every single year.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is putting more money in people's pockets. And it relieves a person to know, well, I don't have student debt hanging over my head. I can now invest in a business. I can do something more with that income. But that's not their plan. You see, yesterday I made note while our chief whip was making his presentations. And these are things that members of the public don't normally hear.
Yeah.
And so we have to do that. While the chief whip was making his presentation, he said, under the APNU AFC government, for the first time in the history of Guyana, the blind cricket team from Guyana went to St. Lucia to participate for the first time in our history. And you know what the Attorney General said? And what difference does that make?
Wow.
Is that an accomplishment?
Wow.
He further went on to say, tell me what you build. And you know, my analysis of that statement is that if you can build buildings, that is development. And so writing off student loans is not an investment in our young people. It's not an investment in the development of our human resource. They don't see that. The other thing I took offense to that statement is that our people with disabilities should be respected at all costs.
And given every opportunity.
And given opportunities because they are at a disadvantage.
Correct.
And I felt so offended by that statement, but that's their thinking.
And you know, MP, when I hear this coming from you, it speaks to what we see in the budget.
Absolutely.
Because at first glance at the budget, or just examine it a little, all you see is lots of money being placed into infrastructure. No emphasis is being placed on the most important natural resource, which is the human resource, or the most important resource in any nation, which is its people. And we see this budget basically putting the people on the back burner rather than putting them in front. I know that we have you talk about the student debt write-off, and there was also talk of the free education, which was a promise by the sitting government in their, I don't know if they'll call it a manifesto, because, you know, they told us everything that we saw on all the posters and everything during the election was a Photoshop. But we see nothing that is even indicating that will happen.
So let me say to you that I know that the installed president would have said that they will undertake free education. They didn't say when, but he knows that will happen in 2025.
When they're heading for election.
Folks, I want to say that is an elections gimmick. And you don't just go about that making a statement. Free education is not a statement. It is a process. And this government should have started that process long before today. But we have the access. And I want to remind our viewers that it was LFS Burnham who ensured that free education is given according to the constitution of this country from nursery to tertiary.
Correct.
And it is the PPP who started charging at the University of Guyana. Now, you coming back after doing that for so many years and coming back now to say you are going to give free university, that is right. You are now going to right a wrong that you have done. But instead of righting the wrong at the right time, you're going to wait until 2025 and make it an elections gimmick. Is that your true intention? You know, the Minister of Education said that when we come to this house, education should be treated apolitical. We should not make it political. We are going to hamper the progress and the transformation of education. I want to say to these people that after 2.5 years of being in government, the Honorable Manik Chan is talking about, she's had consultation on transforming education. She has now come with 5 pillars of transformative education action points and so on. But could we take a moment to reflect that we are still operating under an antiquated legislation for education? It's older than me, and I am older than her. So it's obviously older than her. Why should we transform education with an old legislation? It is upon her to bring that to the National Assembly. I know a lot of work was done. We need to ask the question, why are we transforming education, spending so much money to transform education, and the legislation is old? There's a lot to talk about that legislation. And that brings me to another point. I really did. The speaker really disturbed me last night, and I
could have
take
seen
it
your
personal.
expression.
But the portfolio of education requires you to deliver at a certain level. So I didn't entertain his distraction. And when the speaker interrupts you, it is strategic. It is to take you off of your points and to ensure that it doesn't get into the Hansard. He said to me, he threatened me last night, he's going to strike me. And these are things that you have to let it go there at that moment so that you finish, because my recommendations were coming one after the other, and that disturbed them.
Yeah.
We will continue to see in the National Assembly misogynistic behavior. And I find it disturbing that the speaker has now joined the PPP men in the House in behaving like that. I don't take that statement, I'm going to strike you. I don't take it kindly, but that's the behavior. And what are we seeing in the schools? What are we seeing? Students are fighting. Teachers are beating students. Head teachers and teachers are fighting. And teachers are now rebelling what the education officers are trying to do. It's a reflection of weak leadership from top, and you're seeing it manifesting itself in the school. It's just lawlessness.
Yeah.
I know that the Ministry of Education has a unit called the Health and Family Life Education. We also have a unit called the Parent Teachers Association unit. Now, if you have seen patterns of this kind of negative behavioral issues in our schools, aren't you going to take steps? One of the steps that I recommended, could the PTA Association work with our schools to ensure that they start having, because since the new semester, new school term started in September, there has not been PTA meetings.
Yeah.
Could we not engage the parents? Could we not listen to their concerns? I have to say that we have to understand that parents, who are teachers and education officers too, are frustrated because of the high cost of living. And they're coming from home with that frustration, and you're seeing it in their place of work. We have to understand why this kind of negative behavior is taking place in our schools. But instead of finding out what's causing the problem, instead of addressing the socioeconomic constraints of our parents, teachers, and officers, and students, what we see, $94.4 billion is going to be put into mundane, routine actions, nothing transformative, but yet they're going to come here, make the point that they're doing a lot of work. Another area I touched on in my budget, when I looked at it, because I looked to see what is available for the poor, what is available for the disadvantaged. And I looked, there's a particular unit of the ministry, and this is very sad. When I looked in the budget, and I saw there's a unit called Special Education and Disabilities.
Yeah.
And when we looked at that, we saw that the trained teachers are leaving the system. This is the unit that is geared to teach our children with disabilities, whatever disabilities they have to have a different curriculum. They have to have individualized plan, because every child's disability is different.
Correct.
And so we're losing our teachers There's no proper monitoring and evaluation for students.
Mhm.
There is no evaluation at entry at this point in time.
Mhm.
I want our viewers to understand that we recognize that taking care of our people is going to result in a good life.
And a better country.
We ensured that children with disabilities were catered for.
Yes.
We started building this specialized center. There is one at Turkine, there is one at Schoonard. It is time that this government start to invest.
It
If
does.
you are going to talk about transformative education, you have to look at the large number of students who are not making the grades 1 to 3 in maths and English. That number is huge.
Mhm.
We've got to look at remedial sessions for those students.
Mhm.
We've got to look at what we can do for the students with disability.
I remember visiting Linden, and we met with a family where in that family there were two children with disabilities. One was blind and one had one was also, the other one was blind but not fully, and had some other challenges. And the mother, she talked about the difficulty having them attend school. And she talked about, I can't remember what was the name of the school that they would have gone to in Linden that would have helped in their special need cases. But she talked about at that time when we visited, which was, I think, coming down to the end of last year, where she said a lot of the money and programs were cut. So they were having difficulties. Even she said at some point it's it doesn't make sense sending them anymore because they don't have the teacher that usually taught them. They had issues, that teacher had left, no replacement was there. And that what you've just explained is clearly what she was explaining to us when we visited. And you cannot develop a nation if you're not looking into particularly the education system and the young persons we expect to be our future. You have a budget team that speaks about the future, but education, youth, these things develop your future.
Yeah.
And it is heartening. I know, I'm sure the speaker on the floor may soon be wrapping up, but I wanted you to touch on something that the general public is talking about a lot. I can't recall if I heard you talk much about it in your speech. I don't know if it was because of time, but there is some sort of allocation in the budget in regards to housing displaced students. I heard the minister particularly mentioning that in his budget presentation. Could you shed some light on that in regards to all these fires? And we know we've seen tents being put up around schools, etc.
So I did capture in the opening part of my speech a couple of things. I spoke about the students in Mocha Arcadia who would have watched their house being destroyed, bulldozed, and they cried. And the media would have seen me holding one of them.
Yeah.
That particular child watched her father being arrested for being in the house. She watched her house being bulldozed. And so the concern that I have at this time is, when are we going to provide psychosocial support for those children? Because that is severe trauma. To watch that as a child. And we know that if you don't deal with childhood trauma, it turns out it comes out in adult life in different forms. And so I talked about that. I also talked about I actually paused in my presentation to beseech the Minister of Education to take the David G buses that we have in Region 4 in Georgetown and lend some assistance to the parents of Christchurch Secondary, because we would have all known that they've relocated Christchurch students on the East Coast to CPC, and that's quite a distance. It's an additional passage for those students. And so I asked, I'm not sure if she will pay any attention, but I have to say that they are least concerned about the economic burden that they're putting on parents, on the general population, because that's not their focus. building buildings, hotels, and so on, and those kinds of things are what they are focused on. I also, I really like what you said. You shared the experience of what's happening in Linden. But let me tell you a live experience that took place 2 weeks ago. There's a teacher at a nursery school that has two children. The older one is in nursery school, and the other one is still a baby, less than a year old. And she has had to deal with domestic issues. And so they reached out to me and asked, Miss, what can we do to help Miss? Miss is suicidal now. Miss is not coming to school. Now,
Wow.
if we are concerned about our teachers, all of us coming out of COVID, we should have a formal evaluation system in place for our teachers. They are responsible for teaching our children, and so their mindset is important. You know what? I said to the HM, I said, please take Miss to the Linden Hospital. I made contact with Georgetown Hospital, and they said that the psychiatrist is going to Linden tomorrow. I later found out that a psychiatrist from Georgetown travels all the way to Linden 1 day per month.
Wow.
Fortunately, I was able to get that teacher to see the psychiatrist that day. You know what that turned out to be? The psychiatrist would have given medical treatment, but she also recommended psychosocial help. So the teacher has to get counseling. Therapy has to be provided. You know what happened? That therapy is not available in Region 10. That teacher has to travel all the way to Region 4, to Georgetown Hospital. Now, we would have sat in this assembly and passed the mental health bill that says in every community where there is a health facility, you will get the support. But they don't care about the people of Region 10. So the teacher will have to pay about $3,000 every time there's a counseling session. She has to leave school to go and do that. Is that how we are providing a good life for our people? Is that how we're improving the lives of our people?
I mean, those are very, very, very serious concerns that you would have raised, and I do hope that we look beyond politics in particularly these types of situations, and heed the advice that is being given in your case on these situations, because it's extremely important for us to be able to, look into those issues. And as you said, they are the ones that are helping to mold the minds of our children. And if they don't have the required help that is needed, then we are definitely not in a good place as a country. I want to thank you, MP, for sharing your views on this issue and your contribution to the National Assembly. I know that a lot of other places don't share what the opposition has to say, but I am super proud of the presentations that I've seen yesterday, and as we have started off today, to bring the real issues to the table, and not just bring the issues, but to give recommendations like you guys have been doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much.
All right, viewers, I'm going to take you to the floor for a bit. I do believe the current speaker should be close to wrap up, and we'll take a look at what's happening on the floor.
Speaker, this allows me, Mr. Speaker, to speak about participation and partnership. Mr. Speaker, our scorecard, based on the responses and engagements with the citizens of this country, is deserving of us being here, being able to year after year deliver a budget based on the people of this country, centered primarily on the people. Everything that we've done, Mr. Speaker, in terms of our policy making is designed around the people. It is designed to ensure that we put the citizens of this country first. And we believe in that partnership. We believe in that in the people's participation. We believe in that, Mr. Speaker, and we do that. We see the President, Cabinet colleagues, MPs traversing the length and breadth of this country, meeting with citizens, engaging with them on a regular basis, hearing their concerns, and not only listening, Mr. Speaker, but responding and delivering, meeting and in some cases exceeding their expectations.
Honorable member, you've exceeded the first 30 minutes a bit, so you'll have to get someone to give you an extension to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully ask that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. You may continue for 5 minutes and conclude.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members in the opposition, excluding the Deputy Speaker, been trying to chide me on to speak about foreign affairs. And I'm encouraged, Mr. Speaker, to enlighten the people of this country of a project which commenced under the APNO AFC that wasted the taxpayers' money of this country, and that was to establish an embassy in Brasilia. Mr. Speaker, I have a document here, and a report from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is
come back to the budget debate conversation that we're having. We just had a beautiful conversation with Member of Parliament, Natasha Singh Lewis, who is covering education, and she was able to give us a bit more insight on her presentation. With me, seated at the chair today is Mr. Elson Lowe. As most of the viewers would know, Mr. Elson Lowe is an economist, so we'll be having a bit of conversation with the other MPs today. I did not get to give you our lineup for today, but as you know, we just had Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan making his presentation to the National Assembly. Our next speaker will be Mr. Vincent Henry, Member of Parliament, who will be dealing a lot on the Indigenous people issues, followed by the Sherwood Holder, who will be dealing with, I think, matters on natural resources, and also he is the regional MP, so he will be definitely dealing with matters in Region 2. And then he will be followed this morning as well, or as we get into the afternoon, because it's pretty late as I'm watching at the time here, that we'll be hearing Ms. Joretta Fernandez, and she'll be giving her presentation, the FU representative. I do believe she'll be dealing with direct finance matters as well in this presentation. And of course, we have 4 more persons lined up. As you can see on the screen, we have Mr. Bita Sabru Haley, followed by Jermaine Figuera, followed by Ms. Maureen Philadelphia. And we also see here on this poster, Mr. Lennox Showman. All right, so we have a very good lineup today,
Absolutely.
Elton. The conversation has been great so far. We will get to sit down and talk with Mr. Kemaraj a bit later in our budget debate conversation.
Yeah.
And he gives a powerful presentation today. He talked a lot about, the country being one of, and it's something that you constantly say.
You got to talk about it.
The country being probably the richest country because of oil in South America.
At least,
and this is what we're seeing in terms of a budget. Your take?
Well, absolutely. It seems that the PPP either intentionally doesn't want to recognize the potential that Guyana has, or doesn't have any idea of what's going on. Because when you see the measures they put forward, when you see the way they direct funds, they seem to be totally clueless. We of course want to remind viewers that by the end of the year, Guyana will have surpassed Trinidad and Tobago in terms of its per capita GDP. And that as much as you might see the vice president going to Dubai, going to these other places, we have more oil per person than those places.
I think that's one of the points that Mr. Kemaraj made in his speech today. And, it is important for Guyanese to understand that. And he also hammered in the point of the cost of living, the fact, and I saw in the comments some person saying, oh, but cost of living is used all over the world, but we keep saying this. Not every part of the world has the resources that we have to mitigate cost of living.
Yeah, absolutely. Not every part of the world produces oil. Of course, we know there was a high oil price.
Hold 1 second. I see something happening on the floor there. I see the opposition leader on the floor. Let's hear what's happening there quickly.
He was suggesting that we propose 2 persons, and that is untrue. We proposed 1 person, and the minister sent through the permanent secretary to ask for another person.
Okay, that's a clarification, which
totally untrue
which the only I allow. I think we all could learn a bit, Honorable Opposition Leader. What you raised there was a point of clarification, and the standing order says, the standing order said before you could go into that explanation, I had to get leave of the person presenting, and I didn't put it. I allowed you to go, but I thought you were going to say he was imputing improper motive on the honorable member who shadowed him. Honorable member, you may proceed. I'll give you back your 1 minute.
Wait. All right. So I didn't really get because of course we were having a conversation what the issue there was or what was
I think it was a matter of fact the opposition was trying to clarify that something that may have been incorrect was put forward by the speaker at the time. I believe that's Hugh Todd, the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Well, for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as the bits and pieces I have gotten while we were here, I really didn't hear too much on foreign affairs, which is a feature in most of
You're the second
presentation.
person that told me that for the morning.
Well, you see, I'm not wrong because I have been listening in and out even as I'm sitting here, and clearly a lot that is being said. But we were on the point of the
we're talking about Guyana's
cost of living
in Guyana
and the mechanisms that could be used. Yes.
Well, the thing we always want to help viewers to understand, and I say often, I have a Facebook show, The Lowdown, on Saturdays from 7 to 8, is that we've got to understand oil the way that we understood rice, the way we understood sugar, the way that we understood bauxite, because it's really come to dominate the economy in many regards. And the thing is, which all Guyanese should really get a grasp of, when the oil price is high, yes, you have costs of living woes, it's painful at the pump and so on, but we are also making lots of additional money because the price is high. And so what that means is that, as an example, last year, when you saw the price through the roof, people were complaining about the price. It was very difficult. The country made an excess around about $60 billion of revenue that it did not even anticipate that it would make. Now, when they come to us with a measly $5 billion for cost of living mitigation, and we know that they made $60 million they didn't expect to make, the question has to be asked, why aren't you putting those additional revenues towards the cost of living mitigation line item?
I mean, at least 5%.
I mean, something that, you should at least be putting a significant share.
Yeah.
Because, of course, this is not money you counted on, ever expected. So those are, I think, some of the things citizens have to be aware of. Even though I know that they're very frustrated as to the cost of living issue, that is also something to be aware of.
All right. So, it's important for our viewers to understand that part. As much as the world is experiencing it, we are benefiting from it. I see on the floor our MP, Vincent Henry, starting his debate. Let's listen in.
Absolutely.
To mention that listening to the Minister of Foreign Affairs is like listening to nothing of substance. The most important topic that he should have been speaking about is the one where we have a territorial problem with our neighbor. Mr. Speaker, this is so important, and did he mention it? Did he tell us what is happening in the International Court of Justice? He did not. This is a very shameful presentation where the people of Guyana cannot be briefed and told what is happening to safeguard our...
Honorable member, I have every budget debate circulated the words and shame, and I'm hearing cries of shamefulness and nonsense. All of those are on parliamentary.
Come on, you know better.
You have to withdraw it.
Okay, I'm so advised. I withdraw, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask or propose that the Honorable Todd goes back to a foreign relations, foreign policy school. Mr. Speaker, first, please allow me to express my sincere condolences to the people of Caneview, Mocha, who faced the wrath of the PPP's hurricane apartheid, mixed with a big dose of dictatorship and tempered by ignorance in conflict resolution. The pictures and videos of the police pressing an African woman down in the mud and children in tears while their homes were being destroyed will be vividly remembered when Guyanese go to cast their votes at the next general and regional elections. Mr. Speaker, Guyanese will also not forget the likes of Sue and men in the engine room of the PPP who feast on the largest of Guyana while the poor are relegated to poverty and as a way of life. We remember the statements, Sue is my friend. He looks after everything. He looks after everything. And Honorable Todd just said just now that y'all believe and y'all practicing honesty and integrity. Remember Sue. Mr. Speaker, we sat and listened to the Honorable Senior Minister Ashley Singh as he fed himself and all Guyanese to a heavy dose of pills while imbibing murky liquid that has a striking resemblance to water made available to Guyanese by the PPP. All the while regurgitating work done by others many decades ago. Cut and paste. This chap was cutting and pasting other people's work. The direct beneficiaries, who are the people of Guyana, Mr. Speaker, inclusive of the supporters of the installed PPP, from all reports are very disappointed that the largest budget ever presented in Guyana has little or nothing for them. Mr. Speaker, the deep feelings of disappointment is shared by non-supporters and supporters of the PPP. On my way here this morning, the taxi man told me that this budget, they were expecting so much. They were all hyped and, feel this is the best we're going to get something out of it. And he said that what he has noticed is that this is the worst budget he's hearing about here. And it has nothing for the people of Guyana. And he said that what used to happen under the Abdul AFC was indeed well done. And today is worse, he said. And that is where the people are talking. The people are speaking. The people in Guyana are speaking. But you are making up your own stories. Where is Mr. Honorable Todd? Mr. Speaker, all of this with the largest budget. A budget, Mr. Speaker, that is beefed up largely by proceeds from a profit-sharing agreement made possible by whom? The APNU AFC when in government. So you're using what we did to now show off for the people and still punishing the people. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Senior Minister of Finance detailed that carbon credits amounting to US $750 million have been agreed to be paid by Hess Guyana Exploration Limited over a period of time. He further stated that an amount of 15% of this amount would be allocated to the development of indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, while we welcome this initiative, it would be remiss of me to not detail the transgressions that occurred during the process, or perhaps lack of due process, culminating in this decision. Mr. Speaker, it boggles my mind to know that the indigenous people, the true owners of the forests that allowed us to have carbon sequestration and carbon credits for sale, were not allowed to have free prior informed consent with regards to the ART process, ART. I note that an attempt was made to whitewash 2-hour meetings in certain communities as meaningful consultations. How can anyone go through the entire process of meaningful consultations and then reach an agreement with regards to ART process in 2 hours? Further, most of the people of the hinterland speak English as a second language. Mr. Speaker, then we were told that the National Two-Shops Council at the last NTC gave its consent for ART TREES. This is the abbreviation for Red Plus transactions. And you don't know what is ART either, so keep quiet. Sorry, Honorable. Again, anyone who attends the NTC conference will know that it is impossible to meaningfully have FPIC of the ART-3's process due to the limited time available. Mr. Speaker, to make matters worse, many knowledgeable persons pointed out that the NTC cannot legally give consent for sale of communities' carbon credits. The Amerindian Act allows the British Council to make decisions, and the British General Meeting, British General Meeting being the final arbiter. Mr. Speaker, so now we have a half-baked agreement that may very well be challenged in the courts. And that is what the PPP is always doing, Mr. Speaker. Half-baked stuff, half-baked roads, half-baked of everything. Mr. Speaker, in my speech in Parliament on full insurance coverage in case of an oil spill, I advocated that ExxonMobil should make payments to the indigenous peoples directly, and that these payments should be made to the National Two-Shops Council. With this in mind, Mr. Speaker, Guyana Action Party proposes that there be an agreed estimate of the amount of carbon credits available for sale by the hinterland communities of Guyana. And instead of the 15% of income unilaterally assigned to the indigenous communities, an agreed upon estimate should be paid instead. It must be mentioned that in a recent court ruling, the court pronounced that the indigenous peoples of the Upper Missouri are entitled to ownership of their ancestral lands. This would allow the indigenous people and the people of the hinterland to reap benefits from their care of the environment and encouraged to continue to do so, knowing that benefits are available. Mr. Speaker, before the proposal, the NTC should strengthen its administrative capacity and consult with hinterland communities who are the true owners of the carbon credits. Then the true beneficiaries and real owners of the carbon credits would lead the way for a sustainable and beneficial developmental agenda. Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that carbon credits can be traded on the international market. So what is wrong with involving the indigenous and hinterland peoples in this trade? Mr. Speaker, in this process, it will be good to discuss the suggestion made by Mr. Sidney Allicock, former Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, that there be established an indigenous bank in which all monies for indigenous development, especially from such things as carbon credits, can be funneled. Mr. Speaker, in my last budget speech, I read the salient part of the Auditor General's report of 2014, which detailed the abuse of the Amerindian Development Fund by the PPP's Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. I will not get into that, but you can research it on the Auditor General's report in 2014, where $1.2 million cannot be accounted for. Apparently, it was used as a slush fund.
Honorable member, I said abuse, so you're imputing that particular minister abused the fund. I don't think the Auditor General used abuse, so don't misquote him.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the word abuse was not used, and I withdraw it. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we have a number of recommendations that we can make about the whole carbon credit sale, etc. I will just give a few of them because of the time limits. The R3s we propose must be discussed at cumulative committee general meetings after a general people-friendly information package is rolled out. This subject, with all its implications, is far too important and serious to not have the blessings of the concept of FPIC. One important decision would be to agree with the government on the true amount of carbon credits that are available for sale. The monies already paid into the consolidated fund should be deposited in a bank account that pays interest. After the immediate beneficiaries have participated in an agreed process and general agreements made via FPIC, then the actual disbursements can be made by an implementing body set up by the NTC, as proposed yesterday by Honorable MP Cox. The National Two-Child Council should be the lead agency for the indigenous component of the R3s in Guyana. For this to be successful, the NTC has to beef up its administration and fiduciary systems. They should include improved communication systems, accounting and auditing systems, and a project management unit, among other improvements. Mr. Speaker, I note that monies have been allocated to complete the National Two-Child Council Secretariat. One must note that a secretariat could not have been possible if lands were not made available. It is opposite to note that the APNU AFC, via His Excellency David Arthur Granger, committed and granted prime lands within Georgetown so that the NTC could not only build an administrative center, but also build supporting facilities such as boarding and lodging quarters, so that the executive and staff of the NTC may comfortably execute their duties and give improved services to the indigenous peoples of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I noted that the Honorable Senior Minister within the Ministry of Finance regularly embellished the 2023 budget speech with half-truths and total untruths. This is no surprise. We know that the telling untruths is a habit of the PPP. It is in their DNA. One such untruth the minister mentioned is that APNU AFC, in its recent stint of government, did not grant any title to the indigenous communities. Mr. Speaker, absolute grants of land titles extensions were granted by APNU AFC to Mainstay Wayaka, Mashabo, Kapui, and Yupokari. Legal boundaries were granted for Parabara, Rockstone, Tasserine, and Kangaroo. Also, some 45 investigations were completed, which included 32 for extensions and 13 for new villages. I know for a fact that the process of granting titles is somewhat lengthy, and that many communities are on the verge of getting their titles and extensions under the APNU AFC tenure. But the process was derailed because of the no confidence motion by the PPP. It must be noted that if the PPP had not been successful in their no confidence motion, many communities would have received their titles or extensions. These communities would have included Sand Creek, Shulinab, Paricornau, St. Ignatius, and many others. Mr. Speaker, I challenge the PPP to grant St. Ignatius Village a satisfactory title to their lands. All the paperwork was done. Just grant it now. But we know what will happen in St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius people, we know what will happen. Mr. Speaker, it was a total impasse for the PPP to hold a ceremony to hand over title to the village of Kangaroo and Tasserine in the Middle Mazaruni Region 7, only to take it away from the village after the ceremony. They give them and they take it back at the same time. This is the duplicity of the PPP. That is what they are. Mr. Speaker, then the PPP, with much fanfare, handed over a title of extension to Yupukari at the last NTC conference. Although the community had already received that same title from APNU AFC. This was a big joke in Rupununi and the indigenous communities. And that's the extent the PPP would go to try to fool, they're trying to fool the indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, the National Two Chiefs Council during the APNU AFC held their elections and conference in a democratic manner under the APNU AFC. Even the Honorable Deputy Speaker, who was the then Deputy Chairman of the NTC, praised the APNU AFC for allowing two shows of the NTC to mainly manage their own affair. Mr. Speaker, the opposite happened under the PPC's watch at the last NTC, held in 2022. The entire conference was stage managed by the PPP. This included the elections of the chairman. It is standard practice for the outgoing council to prepare and implement a handing over to the new council. However, the PPP ensured that the former council, including the chief Nicholas Fredericks, was bypassed. Mr. Speaker, the NTC then looked like it was a PPP's conference. The coalition calls on the PPP to take its feet off the neck of the indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, in terms of governance, the Ministry of Marine Affairs practices what might be termed different strokes for different folks. Gail, Honorable Gail, hope you hear the one. Mr. Speaker, it seems that the Ministry of Marine Affairs is quick to conduct kangaroo courts against two shouts and senior councillors who are accused of wrongdoings and are perceived to be opposition supporters.
To proceed, you will need an extension, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, I do move that the Honorable Member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you very much, Honorable Henry. You may proceed to conclude.
But the same ministry ignores such actions when accusations are made against village leaders who are known PPP members. Different strokes for different folks in one Guyana. And PPP officials who are accused of serious wrongdoings are allowed to walk free. Just recently in Karasabay, but we can't talk people's names, so we pass that. And who was talking name whole day yesterday and even today? Where is the Honorable? This is perhaps the one Guyana that we hear of when one set of people are sheltered from facing justice. Mr. Speaker, another untruth spoken by the Honorable Minister of Finance was that the APNU AFC stopped training of indigenous youths when assuming government in 2015. And you hear from all of them that they like to tell untruths. Mr. Speaker, in a previous speech, I gave the corrected version of this matter, and we repeated so that the hard-headed honorables, that might be not be allowed, on the installed government side may know the facts. In 2015, APNU AFC, Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, found that the PPP's cabinet had instructed the then acting permanent secretary to cancel the check that was prepared to pay the CSO, thus causing the discontinuation of the CSO's program. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the PPP's cabinet secretary. Now,
Honorable Minister. Mike. Mike, I'm not hearing.
I wish to remind the House that in 2015 August,
Honorable
I
Minister,
stated,
Mr.
Speaker, I stated the standing order.
Yes.
Well, if you shut up, you'll hear it.
Honorable Minister, please. Honorable Minister,
Mr.
please.
Speaker, I said standing
Honorable
order
Minister,
40 subclause 1.
Honorable
I said
Minister,
it before.
Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I heard you state the standing order, and you're standing on a point of clarification. For you to proceed, I'll have to get the leave of the current standing person on the floor. Honorable Mr. Henry, so that the Honorable Minister can make her clarification. Honorable Minister, I won't be able to.
In the
Go ahead,
recording, we
Honorable
say
Speaker.
Auna, Honorable Minister. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the then PPP Cabinet Secretary who signed the letter for the cancellation of the check is now a minister of the government and recently spoke. So, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, point of order again.
Honorable Minister.
The honourable member is continuing misrepresenting an issue. Although he has refused me to speak,
Honorable.
I am raising it a second time on the standing order 40 clause 1.
Honorable Minister, I'm sure the version from the government side will be presented when the next speaker speaks. Honorable Mr. Henry, you have a minute to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I've been interrupted several times. Can I get back that time, please?
You have your time, that extra minute. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. So, Mr. Speaker, whenever one hears the PPP speaking to the contrary, one can and must come to the conclusion that telling untruths is part, again, I repeat, of their DNA. And whatever they say must be taken with a strong dose of cough syrup or something or the other. Mr. Speaker, also the training of some 2,000 CSOs in multiple life skills, inclusive of entrepreneurship, was done by APNU AFC. And presentation was being made to, preparation was being made to double this to 4,000 when we came out of office. Using an improved curriculum, had the PPP not manipulated someone to launch a new confidence motion against the caring APNU AFC government. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the training of hinterland youth. Can the Minister of Army Affairs list the names of hinterland youths that's been facilitated to get training and employment in the oil and gas industry? Or is it that the Minister of Army Affairs feels that training and jobs in the oil and gas sector are not for hinterland youths? Mr. Speaker, another vexing issue is the PPP's seeming policy of placing square pegs in round holes. In a recent questioning of estimates, I raised the issue of a somewhat strange phenomenon that has been affecting many students in the secondary schools. It must be noted that the PPP members of Parliament laughed in a mocking manner when I raised this serious issue. Mr. Speaker, one such episode happened just a few days ago at the St. Ignatius School, when some students displayed paranormal behaviors during school hours. To date, the Ministry of Education is yet to make any comprehensive attempt to mitigate this serious problem. One is forced to question if the PPP is waiting for a death or deaths to occur before taking actions to find remedies. Mr. Speaker, in the absence of the Ministry of Education voice and a requisite solution to this troubling problem, please allow me to make some recommendations.
I trust they'll be finished in about 15 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will use a different place to make those recommendations. But in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask that oh, so many have more. I hope, Mr. Speaker, I call on the government to raise the two-sheriff stipends to at least $100,000 per month. The two sheriffs are also rural constables and should be paid whenever rural constables are entitled to get remuneration. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that the budget is geared for abuse by the PPP. One minister and a big team with police vehicles flashing went to a village in Rupununi just to tell them that they will be getting a new well in the future. And so much money being wasted. It is our big spending and big kickbacks. Mr. Speaker, it is time for a change. It is time to balance development in Guyana with the poor getting their fair share of the patrimony. It is time to bring back APNU.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And to be fair to the Honorable Member, he actually got 8 minutes in the conclusion. Thank you. Honorable Members, this is a good time for us to thank the suspension.
told that students were told to submit their names if they needed snacks. Clearly, the relevant authority do not understand human psychology. How would you ask adolescent children, youths, to submit names that they are hungry or they are suffering? It doesn't happen that way.
No, it can't happen.
Yeah.
That way.
They will not. So, and then please note that many factors now culminate to hinder students in their quest for education. Some of these are the escalating cost of living, which all Guyanese are facing, the starvation wages paid to workers, and many of these students, their parents are workers. The growing apartheid policy, where one set of people get, the others do not get, Then this one Guyana policy again, which is kind of, just one set, being focused upon in terms of getting the patrimony of our country, So we are having a serious situation in our homes. And then I wanted to talk about that the enrollment in the secondary schools is somewhat escalating. It's getting higher and higher. Lots and lots of children in school now. So I was making a proposal that more secondary schools could be built, especially in Region 9 where I know. For example, in the south, I said Marunau could be, we could get one there. And they will take out a whole set of children to attend there who would have had to travel from there to go far distances to get education. I was going to ask for one for Karasabai, also a very big area with 7 communities around it, and they too, could get that sort of facility. And one in Napi. Napi has a lot of villages around it, and they can all come to it. And then I was going to speak about the gold program. And I was going to ask the minister if they had any sort of assessment of the first phase. I'm not sure because I haven't seen anything. But what I do know on the ground is that it was a total failure. Lots of big talk and fanfare. It was a total failure. So, for example, people in Aishalton, students in Aishalton, they depend on digital network. Sorry, digital. But in Aishalton, the network is very slow, and sometimes it's cuts off. A few days ago, we were depending on the network for some information. It was down. So, for the young people to get a chance to really, use the opportunity, they have to get the facilities, and that is good internet. So you cannot be just saying we're signing up 1,000 people, 2,000 youngsters, and then when it's time to study, they can't study.
And then you have this big list to drop out. I mean, MP Ronald Cox as well talked about that in his area as well. He had the same complaint. You have all these people registering for the Gold Scholarship, but even before it goes halfway, they have no access to internet. There is shortage, there was no preparation for that, so they're dropped out. So just like your question, he put the same question to the floor. How many of those students are still in the program?
It's more stress for our young people. But again, what do you do when you have square pegs in whatever? Then I want to mention about the 5,000 increase in old age pension, which would sort of given something like $1,000 per day for the old people to survive on, the older people to survive on. I was asking the question if there's any minister on the PPP side who can live on $1,000 Guyana a day, any one of them. The answer would definitely be no. But they do not think, on behalf of the people, they think on behalf of themselves. So they fatten themselves, and the people all suffer. And then I was going to talk about the workers in Guyana who got, during the APNU AFC's term of office, which wasn't even 5 years, was raised by 77%. 77%. And this government, thinking it very hard to even give you a 10%. They should, in this budget, at least they should have given the people a 10%, the workers a 10%, at least.
Yeah.
It should be more, but at least. But they look after themselves. And then we have at Bean Hill Institute a building, a real good building that was built by APNU AFC. It was a green center. And the idea was it to become the first hinterland technical training institute, and eventually an annex to the University of Guyana. When the PPP came into government, they kind of, like it did with anything else, they threw it one side.
Wow.
It is good. It would be good for them to pick up where it was left off and to utilize that institute and to make it become something that be of service for the hinterland people. And it's a hinterland initiative. It was the hinterland people who asked for it. But again, this government doesn't see it that way. Now, I would have spoken about a situation in Region 9 where there is right now a severe cassava shortage. And the reason why there is a severe cassava shortage is because of climate change. Cassava thrives on long dry season, long wet season. But what is happening now is that you get a big rain, heavy sun, big rain and heavy sun, and the cassava burns out. It starts to get rotten. And so right now, there's a severe shortage. But you're not hearing anything from the RDC or the government, who's supposed to be representing the people. So I wanted to make a proposal that at least what they could do is do a research quickly to get the stem, the cassava stem, that can be able to survive in these conditions. And I'm sure that it is there, and to supply it to the farmers. Because this problem is really hitting us right down to our basic survival. Basic survival. So, but then I don't know where they live. You see them in their fancy government cars driving all over the place, and the people suffer. Then I was going to say that whatever the thing is biblical, whatever you do unto others will one day be done back to you. And there's this problem with Chinese land in indigenous community that is facing an invasion by miners. And I was going to quote it. Can I quote?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Fabric News 12, August 22. Here what was written. In the meantime, the situation of Chinese landing is deteriorating to a point where miners, backed by the police, no less, intimidate and threaten villagers, denying them access to their own lands, so they can no longer earn a livelihood. In addition, the environmental and ecological consequences are a disaster, with mercury in the river and system making the usual source of water for the inhabitants dangerous to use, and the poisoning the fish. Anyone who thought, the quote continues, Minister of Army Affairs, Pauline Sukai, they call her name, could it be depended upon to work in the interest of an indigenous community blighted by the presence of illegal miners, should think again. There is nothing more that we can do at this point, she told this newspaper. Those who govern in this land have to recognize, and that's what I'm saying now, those who govern in this land, as a matter of fact, Stavrou said that, have to recognize that the indigenous people are not to be regarded as just a block of potential votes at election time. Correct. They have rights. So this reminded me of a story where I think it's Pontius Pilate washed his hands on Jesus and said he can't do anything. And that is what Minister Pauline Sukai did to the Amerindian indigenous people of Guyana. She has washed her hands, but she is the person who has the authority to intercede, to make things become better for the indigenous people. And if there is one thing she could have done, even if she was saying she couldn't do anything, is to ensure that the people's human rights are respected. And that the police will not only be on the side of the miners, but on the side of the people who put her there. It is the indigenous people who put her there. But she has washed her hands. And then we have the story of the Isinru's petition to the IACHR. regarding their ownership of their ancestral lands. And there were some very disturbing statements made by the PPP in their defense, because they had to submit a defense at IACHR. And I want to quote that again. This is against Sabbath News, 22nd March 2022. The state held that the Senora villagers have abandoned their traditional ways and customs by engaging in a cash economy as opposed to subsistence, while denying that mining threatens the livelihood of the community. So they're saying that because we use money and we get everything, we have moved away from being indigenous action, What, oh guy. The state also argues that the Sonora community members have lost their traditional culture in aspects such as their building materials, their architecture, and their farming systems. The state particularly emphasizes that most of the members of the community have converted to Christianity and therefore do not preserve an ancestral spiritual connection to their territory.
Wow.
Goodness me.
And this here is how or what the PPP feels or thinks about us, the indigenous people. This is how they have us behind closed doors. They will come to Parliament. They will come, in front and talk all glowing things, they love for us. But behind closed doors, this is what they are thinking about us. And that I and others who have been converted to Christianity, we are no longer entitled to our ancestral lands. That is how they are feeling. And then they will come back to us and tell us that they love us and they care for us and our rights are first thing on their agenda. etc. What do you call people like that?
I've never actually heard this, and this is very damning. And to think that the government would have made such a statement to try to deprive the indigenous people of their rights,
Yeah. Of course, people are entitled to religious freedom as well, so this really tramples on that.
And I know that you made a statement there, and I want to, because you, between talking about it as the viewers were listening, you were being interrupted. Tell us what caused the interruption with Gail in the House just now.
Well, all through my sitting in this Parliament, I have heard the PPP ministers and MPs mentioning that APNU AFC fired some 2,000 community CSOs, community support officers, and that they reinstalled them. And the program continued. And that is so far from the truth, so far from the truth. Because on assumption to office, the APNU AFC minister and team, they found out that indeed the check to pay the CSOs was canceled. And they questioned why it was canceled. And it was found that a cabinet directive was issued to say that the then acting permanent secretary, she wasn't there, the permanent secretary was acting. She was given the instruction to cancel the check. And she did that because it's an instruction from the PPP who was then the government. And so when APNU AFC came into government, that was found. And what we did was to, again, go back to our cabinet, and get monies to pay what was not there, what was canceled. And we got through with that, and we paid them. But we not only paid them, but we recontinued the program, albeit in under a different name, HEYS program. And we changed the way it was being operated, because the then CSOs, they were just sitting down all day doing nothing. Let's face facts. But then, we now had a study how they should study. We had people to teach them. I even went to assist, and I went to assist one time in how to make a financial report. So they were getting good training, right? And then they were getting money to do an entrepreneurial project,
Yes,
right? So they were trained in how to be an entrepreneur. I again went to several sessions because I was giving my time voluntary to teach them how to manage their financial books in a store. You know, how much the stocks come in, how it's being sold, what is left back, you know, and how much money, how much profit you make, all of those things. They were being taught. So, but what the PPP is saying is that we stopped the program. They were the ones who canceled the check.
Correct.
And they were the ones who, who, when they came back in the government, came back with the same name, right? CSOs.
They changed the name from what it was and put it back to CSOs.
CSOs, they changed from here to CSOs. And lots of complaints which I won't get into because I feel they should take time to really do an assessment of their program and to make sure that they make it better for the sake of the young people. And young people will make mistakes. They will make mistakes, I do that. But try and make it become better, like what we were doing. So to hear them almost every parliamentary sitting mentioning how we fired this year, so it's a total untruth. Like, can I say lie, because
you're not in parliament, you can use your words here.
Total lie.
Yeah.
Disgraceful lie. So, and that is, like I mentioned in Parliament just now, that's the DNA of the PPP. That's how they are.
Throughout this budget debate, what you're saying here is what we've been hearing. We've been hearing from every MP sitting here. Every program, there is no plan. There is no real procedure to how anything is being done, like you explained for the goal scholarship and continuation of programs like the annex that we were talking about for the university, and the type of help that is necessary. So I think what you're saying there, and we have literally been sitting, and every MP as well has said it, we're sitting and hearing all these lies every time they stand up and they come. I rather suspect the next speaker will try to rebut this issue that you would have raised, because we knew it really struck a chord in them when you were making that presentation. So we'll be listening to hear what is going on there. The assembly is currently on lunch. We want to thank you for coming and sharing your parts of your presentations and the other things that you didn't get to mention with us. And again, I want to commend you for your presentation today in the Parliament in representation for our people.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you.
All right, viewers, we'll be back once the budget debates begin again. We'll be right back here, but for now, they're on lunch and we'll take a break too.